Welcome our Congresswoman Bonnie Watson Coleman, our representative from the 12th Congressional District. I think we would all agree that in Plainfield we love our Congresswoman, and I know that the same is true across the 12th Congressional District. It's always great when she is in our presence. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the presence of our members of the governing body, beginning with Council President Joylette Mills Ransom. Our Vice President, who is making his way up to the front of the room, Steve Hockaday. Our Councilor for the 3rd Ward, Charles McCray. Followed by our 1st and 4th Ward Councilor, Barry Good. Our at-large councilperson, Elton Armani. And our 1st Ward Councilor, Ashley Davis. Only one of our councilors is missing this evening, and I also want to recognize the presence of members of my administration. I appreciate the work they do each and every day, and so to all of the members of the administration, Jazz Clayton Hunt, who else? Shep Brown, Sharon Peterson. I appreciate the work you do every day, so thank you. And now, I can't forget the First Lady. I have to go home this evening.
Garage for you.
And how can I be so remiss in not introducing our favorite assembly person from the 22nd Legislative District, our own Wonder Woman, Linda Carter. And so you came here not to hear me, but to hear from our Congresswoman. And so at this time, it gives me great pleasure introducing to you our Congresswoman from the 12th Congressional District, Bonnie Watson Coleman.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
It's good to be in Plainfield.
Yes.
The mayor did such a great job in introducing all of the elected officials that are here. Thank you for being here. I know you all are busy. I appreciate your being here because you become ambassadors and facilitators of information and feedback for us, and so it is really very important that I get a chance to interact with you on whatever level, including the assembly. I have a lot of staff here I want to introduce to you as well. The strange guy with the camera sticking up there in his hand is Mike Shanahan, our Director of Digital Communication. I get that right?
Press secretary.
Okay, that too. Jordan Lewis, the target of Assemblywoman Linda Carter. Rob Matos Moran in the back. Jossie Edwards in the back. Delara, I won't even try to say Delara's last name. Raise your hand so everyone knows that you're not the other ones. Petra Gaskins, who's back there, you've dealt with her quite a bit. Jamie Gill Martin, who is a person that you have to knock down in order to get on the schedule, because she minds my schedule like even my husband has to get permission. And that's okay. And of course, my Deputy Chief of Staff and the Director of my New Jersey office, Kerry Osmond. And last but not least, did I say Rob?
Yeah.
Okay. And last but not least, the Chief of Staff, James G. So if by chance you are okay and comfortable with the work that I've been trying to do in Washington, D.C., and even in New Jersey, then give them a hand, please. I'm going to take 12 minutes of your time and just talk to you a little bit about things happening in D.C. that don't start with an I. All right? Okay. Just to let you know that there are some myths that are out there that we need to dispel. One of the myths is out there is that we're only focused on the I, and as it relates to the T, also goes by the number of 45. That is not true, ladies and gentlemen. There's a couple hundred pieces of legislation that the House has sent to the Senate that Mitch McConnell, more notably known as Moscow Mitch, has been sitting on. So let me just tell you the kind of legislation we're talking about. We're talking about legislation that protects your pre-existing health conditions and ensures that health care is available and affordable. There is legislation that ensures that your right to vote is not impinged on any level, and that the dark money that's in these campaigns that create all these opportunities to rob and steal campaigns is not allowed, and that there's accountability and transparency in these elections. There's several pieces of legislation, two in particular of late, that have to deal with making it more difficult to get guns without having the appropriate background check, or having the background check figured out before you can actually get the gun in your hands. That's been sitting there for months. There's the Violence Against Women's Reauthorization Bill, as well as the Equal Pay Bill, as well as the $15 pay increase. There's the climate action now. There's one that says save the internet and make sure that is accessible to people irrespective of how much money we make. The internet ought to be free and available to us. There's the Equality Act, which fully and finally will end discrimination against any aspect of the LGBTQ community that's over there. There's a Consumer First Act, which reverses the administration's attack on consumer protections. They've tried to dismantle the department. They've taken away a number of the protections, and they're just, hot firing people, not filling positions, and they're doing exactly what you do if you want to damage your democracy or republic or whatever you want to call it, and turn it into a totalitarian government. There's been a movement down there to, and we're working on a bill right now, although we've already sent some, that would lower prescription drug prices. And this is a tough nut to crack. Yeah. But there is a piece of legislation that we've all seen the pieces of and we've been discussing, and it's going to be introduced very, very, very soon. So I just wanted to tell you that, because from the climate to the right to vote to protecting people from having handguns that shouldn't have guns, there's anything you think is important, ensuring that there's fairness in jobs, paying women the same thing you pay a man for the same job, all those things. The House of Representatives has already done a piece of legislation, passed it in the House, sent it over to the Senate, and it is laying there. It's just laying there. They're doing nothing. Nothing. And in addition to those pieces of legislation, I just want to talk to you a little bit about a few pieces of legislation that I've personally been working on that work in this space as well. You all know about the Earned Income Tax Credit, which is a credit designed to address those at a lower income. I've expanded the bill to include full-time students, emancipated students, and people who are full-time caregivers. Thank you, yes. We have a bill in that tells large corporations, you want to continue to get these credits and you want to continue to get these tax breaks for giving out these bonuses. Well, in order to do that, you got to share your profits with your workers. Not just their salary, but you got to engage in profit sharing. And then there's a guaranteed government jobs program, ensuring that where there's been underemployment in job categories that are quite important to our healthiness and our well-being, and in communities that have been underemployed, there would be a guaranteed jobs program. There would be training in those programs and in those skills that are marketable and needed now in this society. And then a bill that's really near and dear to my heart is called the Next Step Act. And it is a comprehensive criminal justice reform bill that deals with families, deals with women, deals with children, deals with where you're incarcerated, deals with alternatives to incarceration, deals with mandatory minimums. It deals with skills that you should have accessibility to. It deals with new life once you get out of prison. If you name it, anything you could think about that should be in that bill is in that bill. And then finally, the bill I want to talk to you about very, very shortly before we have this other discussion is I have a bill in that says that government should ban the use of all for-profit private prisons. Woo! You can't have criminal justice reform and then build an industry that lives off of who gets incarcerated. And the final thought is that I'm on Homeland Security, you know that. Yes. I'm also on appropriations now, which is yay. Yeah. In appropriations, I'm on the Transportation and Housing and Urban Development Subcommittee, the Labor, Health, and Social Services, and all that committee, and the one on the Interior. And so when I get to go into these committee meetings, subcommittee meetings, I get to look at what's being talked about in communities that generally are underserved. And so we look to put money in things like, let's look at the disparities in healthcare. We need to have more research done on why do black women die at a higher rate from having a baby, and why do the babies die at a higher rate, even if the woman's socioeconomic status is equal to a white woman. Yeah. We still disproportionately have failure and fatalities in our community. I'm also the chair of the Emergency Task Force, Congressional Black Caucus Task Force on mental health and black youth suicide. Yeah. Because while we're finding that suicide is on the uptick, it is disproportionately impacting black community and young community. I mean, when I talk about young, I'm talking about 5-year-old. Now, how does a 5-year-old think that that's something that you should do? 5, 9, 12, 17. And we've had a series of hearings on that. And y'all know that I've already been like the co-convener of the Congressional Caucus on Black Women and Girls, and we're doing as much work as we can. And we're going to continue to look in the issue of missing black women. Why no one else seems to be looking at this. So that just kind of gives you an idea of some of the legislation that I've been working on, some of the hearings that I've been involved in, and some of the concerns that I've been raised. But this has been an incredible 8 days, 9 days. We all knew from the giddy up, that the result of this election was shaky. Can we say that? Shaky? That something went wrong there. And we spent time, trying to justify, okay, no one likes Hillary. You like her now. We didn't really have a reason to vote. No one was speaking to our word. Yeah, we do now. Yeah. And on and on and on, and then we really ultimately know that election was stolen and rigged, and that Russia was intimately involved. And as we found out that Russia was intimately involved, we found out that somehow the president is engaged to Vladimir Putin. and we don't understand the why of it. But there have been so many illustrations, including this very last one, ladies and gentlemen, as it relates to the Ukraine, that Putin is pulling his coattail. So in this latest issue, he was found to have had a conversation on the telephone with the new president of the Ukraine. And in that conversation, you all know that it got to a point where the president of Ukraine said, we're just about ready to buy Javelin, I think it's Javelin weapons from the United States to help us with our defense. And the very next word out of the president's mouth was, yes, and I'm going to ask you to do me a favor though. Meaning, we can deal with that, but we got to deal with this first. And so, the purpose of the $341 million, I believe it was, that was earmarked for Ukraine, was to secure its sovereignty against Russia. So in addition to the other reasons that Trump wanted President Zelensky to do what he wanted him to do, his favor, by what he did was continuing to do Putin's bidding. Because if the Ukraine can't protect itself, then Russia will just go in and take every single solitary bit of it. And then when you hear the President of the United States say, well, I think Zelensky and Putin are going to make a deal, so things are going to be better, and I think we should bring Putin back into the G7. Putin got kicked out of the G7 for what he did to the Ukraine, you know? So we know that. But in addition to that, you know, the funkiness that we thought existed with regard to Russia and the president. The president wanted the Ukraine president to investigate Joe Biden and his son Hunter, who was hired by some energy company in the Ukraine, and Joe Biden, who had called for the removal of a very corrupt prosecutor that the whole world was calling for his dismissal. Those issues had already been investigated, and there was no wrongdoing that was found. So even though a subsequent prosecutor tried to curry favor with the president, his name is Lustenko or something like that, by suggesting that the investigation to Giuliani could continue on, because Giuliani's been dead in the middle of all this mess. What the president did in that conversation was basically use the leverage of the $341 million that was there for Ukraine and any other leverage he had in order to extract a favor that would help him to get elected. He was inviting them to come in, fabricate a lie against the one person that he thinks is the most possible person to run against him. I'm not even sure if that's true. He's going to like really blow up when he finds out it might be someone else.
Yeah.
But what he did in just that exchange, without saying, I'll give you this if you give me that, but just inviting him to do that investigation, to bring that dirt up again, is a violation, a betrayal, an abuse of power, and because of everything else, it threatens our national security. So Nancy Pelosi, God bless her, I would never want to be her. She has withstood incredible pressure from us and from you all, I'm sure, and anybody else that could catch her on the street. Because everybody thinks that Trump has done enough to have impeached him a while back.
Yeah.
And her attitude was, people aren't there, they don't understand what's going on, we've got to make our case. So we had 6 committees looking at various aspects of Trump business. the Judiciary Committee, the Intelligence Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, the Financial Services Committee, and the Oversight Committee. And every one of them looks at different aspects of what Trump has been doing, from whether or not he's violating the Constitution of the Emoluments Act, people being ushered to his hotels and golf clubs and golf resorts and places like that, whether or not he and his family are making money in other ways, whether or not there has been obstruction of justice on the part of Trump when he tried to shut down the Mueller campaign. James just gave me something, I can't even hardly read it. Oh, I think that what he wants me to talk about is a bill. For older people in particular, or anybody who finds himself unemployed and has to take out money from their 401k. Hello. Not to have to pay a penalty. Not to be taxed for it. Thanks, James. Oh, let me just tell you about two other bills then, since that brings up. One of them has to do with if you're of a certain age, and you have to do that. And you're over 55, and you have to take money out from your 401k. Have to, Councilman. Not wanna, have to. Before the age that you don't have to pay a hefty fee. And the other one was two bills that would tax incentives to employers who hire people who formerly incarcerated and older workers. So anyway, back to this. So here we are now. We've had 1 week, and every time you turn the lights on, something else comes out of this. On the way up here, we found out that now the Secretary of State was actually on the call with the president at the time. That implicates him. We know that Giuliani was in it. We know that Barr has been mentioned in it, even though as the Attorney General, he's supposed to be protecting this country, not this man. He's trying to distance himself, but he can't go very far in this. So the Intelligence Committee is taking the lead on the investigation into this issue with the Ukraine. And several witnesses are going to be called. Nancy Pelosi's position is this is a now, not a later. We have to move expeditiously, but at the same time, we have to do two other things. One other thing is that the four other committees have to continue to do their investigations and all of the things that they're looking into in terms of Trump business. And then the other thing that we have to continue to do is that which we do every single solitary day, and to legislate on the issues that you all sent us to deal with. Healthcare, jobs, infrastructure, security and safety, gun safety, you name it, climate. That's what we're doing every single solitary day. So I was at an event right before coming here, and I'm going to sit down and take your questions. Because I had a knee replaced 5 weeks ago, and I'm just kind of standing up here, but it hurts. I had a gentleman tell me at an event that I just left. He said, no one talks about all the work that the House of Representatives has been doing, but I've been watching the legislation that you all have been debating and passing, and the committee meetings that you've been holding, and the things that have come out of it. But no one seems to really want to focus on that. Clearly not the media, because it's not sexy and salacious. No. So I've come out here to try to inform you of some of the stuff that we're doing, and I ask you to talk to somebody about what you heard. And so I thank you for giving me this opportunity to kind of bring you up to date, and I ask now that you feel free to pepper me with whatever questions you have. Members of council and Assemblywoman and everyone else, I'll try my darndest to answer them. But finally, before I do that, let me just tell you, Plainfield, you're really important to my being elected to the House of Representatives. You're a significant block of votes that stand up for me when sometimes things get rough. So let me thank you for having my back. And I pray that you think that I have your back. Thank you. God bless you.
Thank you, Congressman Coleman. Watson Coleman? What? Congresswoman?
I love Watson. I work hard
I'm
for
nervous.
Coleman.
I'm nervous. I apologize. I'm
Just saying.
being in the room with you. I apologize.
No, that's all right. Take it easy.
Okay. Gosh, I couldn't ask for any more bills or a fiercer woman to represent us and to be there and to not take the money for ICE. I understand it was yourself and one other person from New Jersey who said no to that money. Unfortunately, what's happening in New Jersey, and I know you're quite aware of this, we have 2,500 people that are political prisoners. They're not in your district, I don't believe. They're located up in Bergen prison. The prison's located in Elizabeth, which is Union. There's 2 in Newark, and then there's Hudson. And the 300 in Elizabeth, New Jersey, it's a private, for-profit only prison. 300 people, 270 men, 30 women. We had 4 congressional reps, not the congressional rep of Union, mind you. He didn't go in for a 2.5 hour tour of the facility. There was a press conference. When the congressman came out, they said, unequivocally, everyone there was held for political prisons. If you look up the definition of a concentration camp, that is what it is. People held for political reasons. So, along with Never Again action, along with Jews Against ICE, along with Close the Camps, we are there protesting all the time. There's a huge protest coming up on Thursday. We're there every Sunday. My friend is an activist running for school board in Elizabeth, youngest one in the state on the ballot, 19 years old, Hassan Little. We're there every Sunday protesting in Elizabeth. Core Civic just lost a case about 2 weeks ago, $1.4 million, for listening in on the prisoners' private conversations with their attorneys. The 4 congressmen that came out after the tour said there is no mechanism whatsoever for these people to be free. And I would like to know if you could take my congresswoman up in the 11th, Mikey Sherrill, Tom Malinowski, the people that promised they gave this money and they said they would have oversight. Can you please, please, please do, it's 4 counties, it's a half a day, get eyes on it, go inside and speak to these people. Thank you.
I can work on that. I can work on that. I can't promise. I can promise you that I will look at it, but I will work on that. I want you to know that we just had, yesterday, 2 days ago in Homeland Security, we had a hearing looking into the ICE detention facilities and the issue of standards and quality of life issues was something that was raised, and we dealt with a consultant who is paid $3 million to do investigations into these places. Look it up on, Michael will show you how to look up some of it on YouTube. So we're on this, and we're very much interested in making sure, A, no one's there that shouldn't be there in any of these facilities, and if you're in a facility, it meets your basic life needs.
Congresswoman, thank you for coming to Plainfield, and glad to see that your health is better.
Thank you.
One of the things that I'm so proud of you particularly about is the BDS anti-boycott that's been before Congress. And what it does is that it exposes our right to boycott anything that is an injustice. And to go further, I've fought half of my life against apartheid. And apartheid is in Israel. And this government gives $2.8 billion a year to a government that makes Palestinian people suffer, and children in particular. And I was wondering if you are a co-sponsor of HR 2407.
Which does what?
Betty McCollum put before
What does it do?
to save the children of Palestine.
I think I am. I think I am on that bill. Huh? Yeah. I think so. I'll check on that. But let me deal with that issue, please. Because that was a tough vote for me. Because I don't support the BDS movement. Because the BDS movement is about a single state solution, and it is not about peace. I believe in a two-state solution. I believe that there should be a coexistence and that there should be peace in that region. And I don't think that that BDS movement seeks that, nor do I think Netanyahu seeks that. But I support Israel, but I don't support stuff that's happening there. But let me tell you this, my position on that issue was under no circumstances can I, as a black woman, who would not be in Congress today if it were not for boycotts and other demonstrations, I could never, ever, ever say that it's illegal to boycott anything. That is a civil rights tool. That is a right, a First Amendment right, and for that reason, I took the vote the way I did, which was to vote against that. But I need people to be clear that I believe that Israel is a democratic country that shares many of our values. I don't think it's perfect, like I don't think we're perfect. But I think that I'm looking forward to changes hopefully coming out of this recent election. That there will be a movement towards a two-state solution, and that there will be a recognition that we need to protect the innocent children and women and others in Palestine. Thank you.
Good evening, Congresswoman.
Hi.
Coleman, Chairman of the Plainfield Anti-Violence Coalition.
Put that up there.
Norman Muhammad, Chairman of the Plainfield Anti-Violence Coalition. Once again, welcome to the city of Plainfield. The Clean City love you, welcome you, and adore you, and we support you.
Thank you.
I'm really going to be real brief. I just want to make a comment.
Go ahead.
I thoroughly read the Next Step Act, and I greatly appreciate all the work that you did on the House side and all the work that Senator Booker did on the Senate side. And I just want to say, with the work that I'm doing in the city of Plainfield, with my constituents, and with our great Mayor Mapp, we greatly appreciate the work you're doing in regards to the Next Step Back. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate that. We're going to need a lot of advocacy for that, believe me.
Good evening, Congresswoman.
Good evening.
Nancy Pevar, you hear from me all the time. Emails.
Good.
Every every day, every night. A couple things. As a retired federal worker, postal worker, I'm really concerned about the whistleblower and the protections, because it's going to have a chilling effect on every government employee, whether it's local, municipal, state, or federal. It's having a chilling effect. There's also been attacks on postal workers within the past two, the one in Texas that got killed, and also there was one that was in South Carolina, that they have 70 police officers, law enforcement, postal inspectors trying to find out who shot her to death. It hasn't made the news that much, but the carriers are worried, okay? I'm really here tonight for two reasons. One is I asked for your support of H.R. 1179, which is the African American Burial Grounds Act. 37 co-sponsors have been put on there. There's a cemetery in Bedminster. We even have one in Plainfield that nobody knows about. Donald Payne and Tom Malinowski have signed on. I hope that you can sign on to that bill since you're in the Department of Interior. And I'm also worried about the Byron Allen case. I believe that you're in the public broadcasting part, and that's a big case. He's fighting Comcast. It's going to be detrimental to African Americans, and I hope that the Congress is looking at that case, because Byron Allen needs support.
We're
from
doing
all of us.
it. Black Caucus is doing a signing on to an amicus curiae brief.
That's
on
the
this.
best news I've
Yeah.
heard tonight. Thank you very much.
So let me just say something about the postal worker who was shot. That's another reason why I have a couple of gun safety legislation that doesn't seem to go anywhere. One of them is that you can't buy but so much ammunition. You can't buy it online without going to a facility and identifying yourself and pick it up. And the other one is you can't get a gun. You cannot buy a gun without going through training, going through a background check, and having the gun registered. Because I think that the issue may very well be that a gun was in the hands of the wrong person.
Right. Well,
And we've got to do something about. I support banning assault weapons, and I support limiting magazines so that you don't have a gazillion bullets in a magazine.
the American public doesn't realize that this president has put a target on all postal workers' back. People don't realize that, but he has done that. I experienced it myself. After 38 years, it's one of the reasons why I retired.
This is a very corrupt president. Any other questions?
Yes, we have a few more, Congresswoman.
Hi. I actually have a few comments, an update. So being that we're speaking about gun safety, my name's Lauren O'Brien. About 4 years ago, October 7th is the 4-year anniversary of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in Union County, which was, the Congresswoman was our very first speaker. I passed leadership of that group on about in March 2016. And now I started a state chapter for metastatic breast cancer patients. I wanted to let you know, we wrote a state resolution that President Sweeney will be reading for October 13th is National Metastatic Breast Cancer Day. The reason I'm telling you about this is that actually the daily deaths of this disease kills more people than gun violence every day. 115 people die a day from breast cancer that spreads from the breast to another organ. It is incurable. Only 2 to 5% of research dollars go towards treatment for these people. I'm from Scotch Plains, my good friend Tammy Bowling. She and I co-founded this together. We're going to be at a Stampede October 10th in Washington, visiting the Senate to push some federal bills to support patients. That's what I do in my volunteer time. We have a Facebook page called Metavivors of New Jersey, and I'll be here if you want to, if anyone probably in this room knows someone who suffered or is suffering from breast cancer. And unfortunately, if you have an earlier stage of breast cancer, 30% of the time it will come back as incurable. I also want to say today was my first day of work I'm going to be running a statewide campaign in New Jersey for climate change liability, which is going to be concentrating on pushing for the state of New Jersey to start investigating polluters, I can't say who yet, but polluters who we feel are responsible for climate change damage in this state. It's a national stream of action, and New Jersey is getting on board. So climate change, we're here to fight you. Thank you so much for all of your support always.
Thank you.
4 years later, here we are.
Thank you, thank you, thank you for all three things that you brought us up to date. Thank you. We go to Rebecca Williams here.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, it's about time. Come up from where I can see you. Put my eyes on you. How are you?
Thank you.
Okay, my name is Marion Trabelsi. I'm a resident over 30 years. I have two questions really. One was, how can you encourage young people, male or female, to pursue at an early stage? Like I'm thinking that maybe it could reflect in the curriculum at school, something that would turn the light on, because it seems like the light's out. Secondly, regarding to illegal immigrants, do you have some kind of posture in that illegal you, do you have a plan or kind
Yeah,
of vision?
yeah.
What to do with them, to get, incorporate them in some way in our society?
You give me two toughies. So let me deal with the young people. After the Parkland shooting, you saw what happened with the students and how they activated, and how we got some gun safety legislation passed because they got engaged and, you know, of course, the question. Just the other day, you saw all the young people standing up for climate change and how that becomes the discussion of the day. Young people are definitely in a position, a more knowledgeable position than I ever was at that age. And I tell you, I think that Donald Trump is helping us to recruit young people to recognize how important it is to be appointed and be elected, and to be engaged and to vote. And so there used to be a time where if you were a Democrat or Republican, you had a young Democrat club or a young Republican club. I've met recently some young Democrats. I think we're moving again in that direction and trying to reach out to young people. And I understand we have someone right here who's running for office. How old are you?
19.
Oh, there you go. 19 running for in Elizabeth. And that's a great example of what we need, and we wish them the very best. With regard to immigrants, there's no simple answer here. People come to this country for a variety of reasons, and I think the least among those reasons is to do anybody harm. Mostly they are fleeing conditions that we just can't even imagine. And this country has been one that has not had open borders, but it has had justification, and it has had justice. And so we've got various pieces of legislation that would deal with comprehensive changes to the immigration laws. We need more immigration judges to deal with the issues at the border. We need to stop separating families, even though the law says we're not supposed to be separating families. He still is separating families. We need pathways for citizenship for those DACA who've lived here the majority of their life or their entire life. We need to make sure that he doesn't strip away birthright. But there are several pieces of legislation that put together become comprehensive immigration reform. I think this is a country of immigrants. The Native Americans were here first, but everyone else has come here one way or another. Some because they wanted to, or others because we were dragged here. But this country is great because of its diversity, and we've never, ever, ever had this hatefulness like we have now. And so we need to get him out of office.
Good evening. My name is Veronica Brown. I'm a resident of Plainfield and employed with the Plainfield Board of Education. My question to you is, on behalf of our young women, what are your recommendations for those who are interested in getting involved in politics? That's one part of the question. The other is, I would like to invite you to have a roundtable discussion with our students, or even our board, to help inspire our young people. My other question is, that was
just one question.
that was part of one question. My other question is, how can we make the voting process a little easier for our seniors?
Oh my God.
Disabled people.
So I got the ballot in the mail. I find myself running the Monday before an election because I find myself voting on election day. So on Monday I go, oh God. So I go down to get the ballot, to request the ballot. I fill out the application to request the ballot. Then I go run across town and get the ballot, and then I fill it out and turn it in. And that just ought not be that way. So I was smart the last time I filled out a request for absentee ballots, and I'm relatively knowledgeable about this stuff, and I tell my husband, your ballot request has come in the mail, and I looked at it and I said, oh, this is the ballot. This is the ballot. So I think we need to do a number of things. I think that we need to have voting, early voting. I think that we ought to have voting in places like malls and other places where people go. I think that we ought to make a vote by mail simpler. And I think we need to be voting on weekends. That's really how we find a way. So now with regard to young girls getting engaged, I think the same thing applies when I said, the sort of political clubs. Also, the sororities have a tendency, and even the Jack and Jills and all, are taking on a very sort of political, not partisan, but political posture, letting young people know how important it is to be a part of that process. And I also think that if there's a young girl who's interested in politics, then she needs to connect with her municipal party, whether she's a Democrat or Republican, and start hanging out with them, volunteering for the local campaigns. There are campaigns that are going on right now. They'd love to have a smart young girl in the office, on the phone for them, doing phone banking, doing letter writing, reaching out to people, doing a myriad of things. That's the way you get involved. And then the price is right because they're volunteering, right?
Thank you.
Thank you. And yes, I will come and, my schedule according, allowing me to, I will certainly come and talk to whomever you'd like in a round table.
Hello.
Hello.
Okay, my question has to do with, I would like to get a copy or something, or where do you go for the different bills that the House has put together that have been stopped because of Mitch McConnell? And I want to know, how does one person have that amount of authority to stop bills coming out of one aspect of our government into, even if he wants to vote no, I still think there should be a way that those things should be presented to the Senate and to everybody in the country. Because what you said previously, I had no clue. All right?
Yeah.
But let me finish. And my question still is.
Sorry.
My question still is, how does one man, or does he have a committee or something, get to arbitrarily? And so when you get in power, and I mean get some senators, that was my other question. Are you going to focus on getting more senators into the Senate so that you get those things passed? And maybe you can change the policy or the requirements or whatever it is about the leader of the Senate. Because I don't think that one person should have the ability to arbitrarily sit because of his political policies or whatever he believes, or somebody paid him, or whatever, I'm gonna be real. I'm just saying, because this is the United States, and we as the African Americans in this country, we know what that means. It doesn't just come from a place of words on a wall. It's like 200 years we had to fight to be where we are in the death of Martin Luther King. So don't even get me started. I just want to know, why does he have so much power like that? And is that something written in the Senate protocol or something that you can change?
He's the majority leader in the Senate, and he sets the schedule of what comes before the floor.
Can you change?
They can change it. They can change it.
When you get a new, set of senators.
A new set of senators can change it.
That and change the policy and whatever. I understand that if you feel you have 3/4 of the country behind you or something, that's fine, and you're the head of whatever. But if you're almost like 51, 50, 60, I think more people should be involved.
So the Senate is definitely a target for all of us. And we recognize that this whole impeachment inquiry, and where it leads, if the Senate does nothing with it, they're going to really feel that when they get home, because the one thing we recognize is that this impeachment inquiry about what happened on the telephone and what was promised and what was, transacted. People who don't understand necessarily what Mueller's investigation revealed, they understand this.
No, they don't.
So, and the senators are very, very nervous about this. So Mitch is even a little bit nervous about this, and but as it stands right now, he has the authority to not put any bill up that he doesn't want. But you asked another question. Oh, how do you get information? You can go on the website. You can go dems.gov, and you'll see the list of all the bills and what they do and their the disposition of them when they were sent over to the Senate. Do that. Do look up what's being held up, and tell the Senate, not only your two senators, but tell Mitch.
Yeah, I'm going.
I want to make sure, donate to his opponent.
Thank you.
Exactly.
How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good. How are you? My name is Quane Palmer Chambliss. I am from the city of Rahway, New Jersey. Thank you to the Facebook gods. I was on my way to ShopRite, and it just happened to pop up on my phone. I just looked around in the street, and I came here tonight to be with you. How you doing, First Lady of Queen City? How are you? I had an opportunity to sit next to this beautiful couple over the weekend down in Atlantic City at the Democratic Committee Convention. My concern is about the state of African American women in politics. We are not as fortunate as the Queen City to be represented in such a beautiful way that they are here. While I do not want to be adversarial to the Democratic Committee in Rahway, I do want to shake some things up because we are being ignored. And we know that there is not a election in the United States, right, since maybe 1964, where the majority of white voters have put any Democratic person in. And we know the power of the black woman vote, but I do not think it's being respected where I live. So now, what advice would you give me as a person who I don't want to be adversarial, but I don't want to keep seeing sisters being overlooked and being told it's not your time. Wait while we give them the vote without question, without demanding anything in return.
Well, irrespective of Democrat or Republican, if there is a woman, anyone who's interested in running, you need to have a group behind you, and you need to have the conversations with whichever affiliation you have, and they know who brings the vote out, and they know where the vote goes. And I shall tell you that you don't always win, but even if they say it's not your turn, you can still run. They told my dad it wasn't his turn, and he ran, and he lost that first time. But then he did such a showing that he then got appointed, and then he got elected and elected and elected. Sometimes you just have to step up, and if it's you or anybody else, then you organize your support behind you so that they see that you're not alone.
Hello. I'm Claire Van Blake, born and raised in Plainfield, New Jersey. I have a question about Social Security. I find myself on Social Security. I'm battling lung cancer for the second time. And I've been thrown in instant pot, basically. I had to use all of my resources on my first battle of lung cancer to pay my medical bills. So my reserves are gone. Because I had to retire early and take Social Security, I get the lower amount. So I'm saying to them, well, okay, by the time I get to 67 and a half, which they wanna work you into the ground before you get your joke on Social Security, now you won't get the higher amount, you only get the lower amount. Well, where's my money going? That I worked all these years to put into Social Security, and they're finding every way to keep it from me. My medicine is $3,500 a month. I'm lucky to be able to go to the drug company directly, but now I've got to pay for all my other drugs that I have to take because I'm not covered under the drug plan because the cancer medication takes my whole allotment for the year, so I'm not covered under that. Then you've got to pay the $135 from your Social Security amount to pay for the first round of insurance. Then I've got to pay to get a secondary plan, so there's not much left there. Then you've got to get a job because now you can't pay your bills. So you get a job, but you can't make over a certain amount, and then they penalize you. So they get you coming and going. So I wonder what you can do to help with that.
Well, first of all, my best to you in your second bout. Just like you overcame the first one, you'll overcome the second one. You don't have a health insurance?
Social Security, I had to
Medicare, you have Medicare. You have no other.
I had to get a secondary plan because.
That's why Democrats have been fighting for the expansion of the health care under the Affordable Care Act. And that's why many of us are reluctant to do Medicare for all because there are varieties of plans that work for people that we think that they should have access to that choice. With regard to your health care, that's an issue that we're fighting Republicans about expanding and ensuring that you have the medical coverage, that you have the prescription drug coverage. And the fight that we're doing right now with trying to lower prescription drug costs, something I hope will benefit you. John Larson, who is a member of Congress, has a very good Social Security proposal, which grows with inflation, and its minimum benefit is increased, and that it increases, ever so often. And so that's something that I've signed on to, and a number of people have signed on to, and if we can get, I think, changes in an administration, you might see some of those. Right now, though, they're trying to take away Social Security and change it and do all kinds of mean, nasty things to it that we're trying to fight and stave off.
There is a second part. So I would be working with Robert Moran. I've called and spoken to him.
Rob,
yes.
Montrose Moran.
Yes, because I had a situation again. I called Department of Treasury, and when you call there, you can't get a direct number. They won't give you a name. They won't give you their last name. They won't give you a direct phone number. They won't give you their address. And they just tell you, you're kind of on your own. So I got tired. I called Robert. Helpful. But still, they don't have to give you any accounting. So they said I owed them X, Y, and Z amount of dollars. They just send you a bill. Here's what you owe us. Pay it. That's it. Show me what, if I put it on a credit card, you've got to show me I charged it. Here's the charges. Here's what your interest, and here's what you owe us.
Who sent you a bill?
Department of Treasury.
Well, they have to have an explanation.
They don't. They didn't.
Then don't pay it.
They didn't. No. They said I owed them. The problem is I fell and I had my neck fused 8 years ago. 11 years ago.
There's got to be an appeal process. Look at the back of the.
I appealed it all the way up and lost. The Department of Labor okayed my surgery, and then they decided, oh, you've had the surgery, we've changed our mind. Now you owe us this money.
Here, let me ask you if you would just follow up with my staff. Let us look into it some more for you.
Absolutely.
If you just use Rob as the contact person back there because he has some knowledge of you.
Well, I'm just saying, they have no accountability. They don't have to answer your questions. And
they have to answer ours.
Yes, they do.
So have two questions, Representative Watson Coleman. Blacks represent about 12.1% of the population in the United States. But we are disproportionately represented in the prison population. Not because we commit more crimes, but because of systemic injustices that exist. We are not able to be represented at the polls in the same numbers because so many of our people are incarcerated. Is there anything that can be done to restore voting rights to the incarcerated so that we can have a greater say in the electoral process?
Actually, I think there's a piece of legislation that has been introduced, or at least discussed, that has to do with providing incarcerated individuals with the opportunity to vote. They have the right to vote. Is it Vermont, James? In some states, is it Vermont? Yeah.
No,
No.
Maine and New Hampshire.
Yeah. In states that are underrepresented as it relates to people of color. So yeah, there is some legislation that's sort of in the hopper being discussed about restoration of voting rights for those under certain circumstances who are incarcerated, particularly those who are in prison waiting for, in jails waiting for their trials. Therefore, things like can't pay your tickets, can't pay your child support, can't pay your this, can't pay your that, non-violent, drug kind of things like that. Yeah.
And my next question has to do with the fact that Plainfield is along the Raritan Valley line. And we have been fighting very hard for a one-seat ride into Manhattan because of what it means to our economies along the Raritan Valley line. And it is being said that for every minute saved going in and out of Manhattan, that property values rise by $3,000. And so there are a limited number of slots going into Manhattan, and that has been the argument against the Raritan Valley line getting a one-seat ride. But we have an issue with funding for the Hudson Rail Tunnel. We also have an issue with the Portal Bridge, which gets stuck oftentimes. But we also know that our president has been tampering with funding that was already agreed upon by the previous administration. What hope is there that funding will be made available so that we can get that tunnel?
I can't believe you're asking me this question. I wasn't at the Democratic convention this weekend because I was on a train. I was on the kind of train with a couple of members of the Appropriations Committee, the Transportation, Housing, and Urban Development. And it was one of these trains that has the big window. And so you see this way, but you're going that way. So we went from Washington, D.C. all the way up through the tunnels into Penn Station. And the purpose of that trip was to look at all the projects that needed to be done. And then, so we saw the tunnel. We saw the fact that New Jersey Transit alone operates 40 trains a day, but really has a need for 80 trains a day. We know that you go from 4 tracks to 2 tracks as you're going into New York, but if you just open up these tunnels, we can take 4 in and 4 out, and we can double, triple, and maybe that creates an opening for that opportunity. On the second day of that, CODEL is what it's called, we went and had a briefing at the Port Authority. And we talked to New Jersey Transit, Amtrak, Port Authority, and the Gateway Development Corporation. And we talked about the various aspects of the Portal Bridge, as well as the Gateway project. The Portal Bridge is probably closer. They think that they've remediated every question and concern and excuse the feds raised to give it the rating that it gave it, which didn't allow it to go forward. And the state of New Jersey put more money behind it, so that can't be an issue now. So we're thinking that they're going to get an answer from the feds before the president puts it in the budget. So we should know within a couple of months. And Amtrak seemed to be optimistic. The Gateway Tunnel project is another project that is equally important, if not more important. And so they showed us the issues underneath the tracks, as well as it's not just going through the tunnel that's an issue. It's not just the 2 tracks coming from 4 to 2, but it's even the wires overhead that provide the electricity to the trains. All of that is part of that Gateway project. We are trying to answer every single solitary question that the federal government has placed upon us in order to qualify for that project. But Donald Trump said he'd rather close government down than to fund that project.
Wow.
So unless he has a change of heart, there has to be a change of presidents.
Yeah.
So if there's one more question, I'd be glad to tackle it. Otherwise, hello.
Councilman Steve Hockaday, 4th Ward Councilman. Thank you so much for being our Congresswoman. It's a joy to have you there.
Thank you.
You're very well representing us. I want to kind of crawl a little bit back to the Ukraine situation, because we have a lawless presidency in so many respects, and which is stacking the federal courts, which is a whole nother issue that will create a lasting harmful legacy. But they've been so lawless. I was a little shocked when the transcript of, or they call it a transcript, was released. When there's so many other things, including its tax returns that haven't been released. We've been asking for years. So I was a little skeptical about the hasty, the almost immediate release of this transcript. So I don't really trust it. And part of me, what I want to get your opinion on is, there's some that think that he's really inviting an impeachment because maybe somebody advised him that an impeachment process will bolster his chance at re-election. So just speak about what your colleagues in the House have thought about that, and the calculation that now is the time, and how we can ensure that this doesn't result in him being reelected.
Yeah, thank you. Well, with it being an impeachment inquiry, there's greater access to that information that he's been stonewalling now, and the repercussions of not turning it over are greater. When it comes to you're right, it wasn't a transcript, it was individuals' recollection of what was said on the telephone that they overheard. That was a miscalculation on their part. They really thought that was going to slam dunk it, that no one was going to, because he didn't ask for anything. He didn't say, because he didn't outright say to Zelensky, I'll give you the money for the Javelin weapons if you do me this favor. And what he did was saying, I need you to do me a favor though. Immediately after Zelensky told him, we're just about ready to buy them. Ukraine has already known, they know that this administration wouldn't even deal with Zelensky until they had some idea how he was going to behave in office. They were already contacted by Giuliani. Someone communicated, and we don't know if it was Rick Perry, who went over there as the delegation leader when Zelensky's, when you become president, the inauguration took place, communicated over there. You're not going to have a meeting or a conversation with President Trump until we know how you're going to be governing, how you're going to be acting. But we think that they miscalculated when they let that quote-unquote transcript out. But what's happened
No, you're fine.
Oh. What happened though, this is opening up like a can of worms. You know, it's blossoming, it's implicating more and more and more and more people. It's got the Secretary of State involved in it, it's got the Attorney General involved in it now. It's clear that the violation took place at the point that he asked another foreign leader to interfere with the election. That was the whole Russian thing.
Yeah.
That was the whole Mueller investigation.
Right. Yeah.
Muddling in our election, he invited someone to come in and obstruct. And so, I don't know. I know the word on the street downtown is that they didn't really calculate how that could be interpreted. But I tell you, Nancy Pelosi, when she was dealing with all the pressure from all of us about, you know, he's done this, he's done that, he's got folks coming to his hotel, he gets people to go to his Scotland resort. He's helping, got to deal with this airport where we're refueling and it's costing us millions of dollars more. She said, be patient. He will self-impeach. That's what he's doing.
And just a reminder, the question from Councilor Hockaday was to be the last, so we'll just take one more from him.
So I'm Elton Armati, Councilman at Large. I want to thank you for coming. I have two questions. So one, obviously the Trump tax cuts, they've negatively affected high property tax states in New Jersey, you know, states like New York and California. So is there anything that you're doing or your colleagues are doing to help, you know, with property tax relief? And then also infrastructure.
With regard to the SALT tax, I mean, the governor's trying to do things that create opportunities to declare, to diminish tax liability. Bill Pascrell has been the champion, and he thinks he's worked out something that will right the ship on this. But the truth of the matter is that when there's a new administration and hopefully a new Senate, we need to repeal a lot of that tax bill. Because this particular piece hurt us as a state, as a property tax owner, but there are other pieces that have hurt us just as working people. What was your second question?
So with infrastructure, I know that Democrats thought that that's one area they could work on this president with.
They went to the White House last week, trying to talk to him about infrastructure again. And he said, can't talk about anything as long as we're talking about the Ukraine issue.
That's always an excuse.
So I want to thank you. Some amazing questions. The mayor and the first lady are always so gracious to host me and to give me an opportunity to share with you. The council members are always encouraging and willing to work with me. And our Assemblywoman has just been doing a fantastic job, as well as our county freeholder. Keep the faith. Keep the faith. Keep your hands to the plow. Make everybody that you know register to vote and then to vote, because our lives depend upon it.
Yeah, that's right.
A democracy is a great form of government. A republic is a great form of government, whatever you want to call us, but it is fragile. And you don't change a government by leaping different big things. You change it incrementally. You take power away from the people. And that's what they've been consistently doing. And we must remember that this government was conceived by, of, and for the people. And we are they, the people. Thank you. God bless you.